On this week's Carrier Wrap, we speak with LGS Innovations to discuss challenges associated with large spectrum reallocations and the future of spectrum sharing. Well, thanks for joining us in this week's Carrier Wrap. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, editor-in-chief for RCR Wireless News. This week, we're joined by Kevin Kelly, who's the CEO of LGS Innovations, to speak on the challenges of spectrum allocation and monitoring. So, Kevin, let's start off with maybe giving us a little background on LGS.
Okay, sure. So, LGS Innovations is a Washington, D.C.-based company. We're actually based in Northern Virginia. It found its roots as the home of the federal part of Bell Laboratories. So, LGS used to stand for Lucent Government Solutions. This was the federal part of Bell Laboratories that principally did research and development, and we built systems for the federal government marketplace. It was operated as a business unit within Lucent and then a subsidiary of then Alcatel-Lucent once Alcatel and Lucent merged up until March of 2014 when the subsidiary was sold to a private equity group led by Madison Dearborn Partners in Chicago and Covant in McLean, Virginia. And now we're a US-based privately held company that focuses in the same marketplace. And let me just cover at a high level the work that we do. LGS has three main business units, the largest of which is that vestige of Federal Bell Laboratories. We do research and development in RF communications, secure RF communications, spectrum monitoring, spectrum management. We build solutions for spectrum sharing, for monitoring the wireless spectrum, both for civilian use as well as the militarized use. If you think about the DoD deploying into contentious areas and not understanding who's talking to who, what spectrum's available, what's happening to the noise floor, et cetera, we build all the tools that help the warfighter understand that environment. We have a group that focuses on photonic capability, high-powered optical amplifiers and receivers for wireless photonic communications and sensing technologies. So when spectrum, RF spectrum is not an option and you need to move to the photonic domain, we have a group that builds the systems that help you communicate in that space, and it can be space-based, terrestrial, sea-based. There's a whole host, even undersea-based optical communication. So there's a group of people that do that. There is a cellular group. These people make very small, man-packable cellular base station technology, 2G, 3G, 4G technology for use as backup communications, inter-squad communications, secure communications in environment where you need commercial wireless spectrum, but you can't rely on the wireless infrastructure for security reasons, for stability reasons, a whole host of reasons. And then we have a cybersecurity group. So everything is cyber these days. Everything has vulnerabilities. When you have Internet of Things, 4 or 5 million new devices every day introduced to the network. Each one of them presents its own challenge from a vulnerability standpoint. So we have a group that focuses on identifying and caring for the vulnerabilities in individual systems as a part of the infrastructure. And that's getting all the way down to the source code in some cases, finding the vulnerabilities inherent in source code and removing them. We have a whole host of technologies. We have hundreds of global patents. This business is an innovation company. We're not a reseller. We're not principally an integrator. We're an innovator. We solve problems with technology. So that's the majority of what we do. There's a services unit that wraps services around that technology and delivers what we call ISR, intelligence and surveillance and reconnaissance services built around signal monitoring and spectrum awareness. And then there's a deployment group that builds network infrastructure from commercial products all the way up to very specialized networking products for the government. So LGS, as it stands today, is $400 or $500 million company, 1,100 people based in Northern Virginia, and we have laboratories around the country in New Jersey, Colorado, Chicago, and other areas.
Well, those all sound like pretty busy businesses for LGS today.
Really, there's 10 other businesses that I didn't mention that are just no. Those are the areas where we have had our expertise, and frankly, the areas that you're right. In the federal government space, in the civilian government, even in industry, we're finding commercial parties that are coming to us with cyber issues, with communications issues, and looking to solve hard problems. Spectrum is, as you know, it is one of the most rare commodities, right? We can't invent new spectrum. We can invent novel ways to make better use of it, or maybe sharing techniques.
Yeah.
But the reality is we have what we have in terms of spectrum. It's one of the reasons why our photonics business has really started to take off. Is we need solutions outside of the RF domain, and there's a very limited number of solutions in that space. But it's again a reason why our photonics business is a nice adjunct to the wireless business.
So what's your general view on how the government has done in terms of allocating spectrum to the commercial market?
It's a bit of a loaded question. It's an important one. I say loaded because I know there's a lot of unhappy people. They want spectrum released more rapidly. They want larger chunks of it. They want the reallocation to happen more rapidly. The reality is nobody's done this before. And so the shuffling of the wireless spectrum, the reallocation, moving TV channels, reallocating government spectrum, encouraging sharing, these are all brand new topics. And it's easy to be hard on the government. It's a big amorphous group of people, and it's not one person. And so, but the reality is, I think they're doing the best they can. I think they're being very creative about some of the techniques that they're using. The reverse auction idea, followed by the forward auction, seems reasonable enough when you look at the results. Kind of mixed results, right? The sellers aren't getting what they want for it. The buyers are surprised at how quickly the bidding ends, and the allocation needs, well, geez, I wish you would have released more in this area. And the sellers are, of course, worried about guard bands, and the buyers want more broadband technology. So when you get into the technical aspects of it, you're going to find a lot of different positions. Our position is it's a valuable commodity. It's rare. It's incredibly useful. It is what is fueling large portions of our economy, either directly or indirectly. It's important that we pay attention and manage this carefully. Having operated in countries that don't have an FCC like the United States, I can tell you that the Wild West is also not a good solution. Having to manage communications in countries where their FCC equivalent has fallen apart, never existed, is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. So as difficult and as complicated as we've made it in this country, it's about as good as a system as I've seen. And so I applaud the government for coming up with novel ideas to do the reallocation, albeit to some measures not fast enough, not producing the proceeds, and so forth.
Well, it's been an extremely complicated process to this point to allocate spectrum, but how do you view that changing going forward?
It absolutely is. And I know that we'll see what the change of administration brings to bear, but there are lawmakers on both sides that are encouraging the FCC to focus on the auction process, on the reallocation, on making sure that the frequencies that we have spent time and money freeing up in this country are then reallocated to either government agencies or for-profit industries, so that they can continue to fuel our economy and not allow groups to get too mired down in policy changes, particularly given the impending change of administration, where anything may happen at the end of the day. So I think demanding that they focus on the task at hand, which is this latest phase of frequency auctions, is good advice.
What impact, if any, do you expect from the administration change that might have on LGS?
We don't see a huge impact. If you think about our principal customer is the Defense Department as they are deployed overseas, and the intelligence community, who's keenly interested in maintaining awareness of the wireless spectrum, making sure that they understand what's happening from a communication standpoint. That doesn't change in an administration change. And I'm lucky enough to work in a portion of the government that is relatively apolitical. Everybody has their own individual personal political views, but the reality is the mission is rarely impacted by those policies. You see that more in environmental areas and more domestic related issues. But as it applies to national security, it's a relatively apolitical environment. So that doesn't impact our core business as much. As it relates to where we've made heavy investments in spectrum monitoring, spectrum management, spectrum sharing technologies, that was all in advance of a need that we foresaw and many foresaw for customers, both commercial and government, to have available to them these tools that can tell you at a very low level of granularity what's happening in the wireless spectrum around you. And, moving the technology from what was principally energy detectors, is somebody transmitting, to who's transmitting, where are they, what protocols are they using, who are they talking to, do they have a legitimate right to transmit in that space, do they have a wandering transmitter, is this a rogue transmitter, am I being jammed? All of that detail, which was what the warfighter worried about, 2-3 years ago, is now what a carrier has to worry about, because they're so close, the frequencies are so close to each other, the guard bands are shrinking, and now they're getting into these sharing agreements where they need to police each other in their use of the spectrum. So it's really created, irrespective of an administration change, the whole environment has created a new business environment for us.
Well, I guess that what you're able to bring to the table is becoming more important to the process in terms of spectrum management. Process out there.
Yes, it is, and we're hearing that from a whole host of customers. We've talked to people who run wireless networks inside a sports stadium, which it tends to be a great experimental microclimate of very dense, high data users for a period of time, and then they disappear. It's akin to what we're about to go through in the DC area here, which is an inauguration parade where you have potentially 1 million people in one spot, and then a few hours later they're gone. Being able to model that and look at the spectrum and everything else is those are unique scenarios that the current environment is giving us an opportunity to engage in. Whereas, as you said before, when they were giving away spectrum, it was never envisioned that we would all have multiple wireless devices on us at any given time, right? It was you knew somebody who was really wealthy who had one of those mobile phones built into their Jaguar. Well, now it's in everybody's pocket, and it's a totally different scenario.
So what are some of the bigger challenges facing LGS going forward in terms of continuing to monitor spectrum allocation practices?
So in as much as this has become a broad concern, a lot of people are talking about this. There's a lot in the press about spectrum reallocation and auctions and so forth. What's surprising to us is how little people actually understand about the technical aspects of doing really detailed spectrum monitoring and policing these sharing agreements. So we're very much in the education mode at this point. We have real systems that we can demo to carriers, we can demo to satellite service providers, we can even demo to our government customers who were likewise being encouraged by the government to release lightly used or unused spectrum. They in turn benefit from the proceeds from that auction, which they can then redeploy on other infrastructure projects that they have. But we're starting at step one, where they're saying, well, if I'm going to share the spectrum, I'm going to need to be able to determine if somebody is transmitting within spec. So I'm interested in understanding the primary bands and all the side lobes around that one transmission. And you have to take that conversation to the next step. What are you going to do about it? Once you understand somebody's transmitting in your frequency, which you have every right to, if you're a carrier and you've paid for it, potentially billions of dollars, what are you going to do about it? You don't have a police force. You can notify the FCC. What are you going to tell them? Something's happening somewhere. I can't tell you what. Or are you interested in knowing specifically what the transmitter looks like? Is it a cell phone? Is it a rogue transmitter? Is it somebody playing with a hobby kit? Is it a UAV? Is it a model airplane? What is it? Is it a garage door opener? What protocols are they using? What's the geolocation? Does this happen at 2 p.m. every day? Or is this being done intentionally to disrupt my business? There's a lot of what ifs, and leading the witness, if you will, having that conversation with the customer is really where we are in that education phase. And once we flush out what their real concerns are and what they plan to do about it next, then we can talk about real solutions. It's not always our solution. There's some really inexpensive solutions that may solve some of their problems that we can steer them towards. If you want to get much more sophisticated about the signal characteristics, then we have some pretty fancy technology to show.
Well, there also appears to be challenges in terms of other industries interfering with cellular spectrum as well. I guess what are your challenges, or what are the challenges in terms of policing those controls?
It's interesting, and I'm no attorney. I should have mentioned at the beginning. I'm a bona fide non-attorney.
Good.
I'm an electrical engineer by training. Somebody made a mistake and let me run all of this. But that being said, the policy is really starting to lag quite a bit. It's been over 100 years since Marconi invented the radio, and we have simple questions to answer, like who owns GPS spectrum? Obviously, the government has the right to transmit in it. The GPS satellites use it. If it's being jammed, is it a crime? This is an open question, believe it or not. Is it part of our national infrastructure? Is that an act of war? This gets into the same areas as cyber.
Sure.
If somebody's denying me from transmitting in my space, and I determine that it's an adversary, a foreign adversary, whether organized through nation state or not, is that considered an act of war? There's a healthy debate about all of this that we're not going to solve with technology, but we can certainly point you to solutions that can help you identify when it's occurring. But just an example of this area that's evolving, and simple things like, I say simple because I don't have to do it. Policy, policy really has to catch up to all of this.
I guess can policy and the government keep up with the rapid evolution of spectrum needs?
Definitely a challenge. I'll be kind because the federal government is my primary marketplace. Sure. We've always taken the tact of, look, running General Motors is no easy task. There's 1 million employees. Nothing changes very quickly. The government is even larger. Having them turn on a dime is, expecting them to anyway, is probably an unrealistic expectation. That being said, let's be part of the solution. I'd much rather show you what the solution might look like. And if you want to ask our assistance in writing policy around that, or making suggestions, or participating in panels, or whatever it is that helps you get to the solution, we are happy to do so. Thought leadership is part of our core values in the company, and we want to help our customers solve hard problems, even if it's just helping them think through it. I'll give you a quick example. FirstNet. FirstNet is a 700 megahertz band 14 allocation to allow first responders to use 4G communications in replacement of push-to-talk radios. A lot of hand-wringing in the early days. Who owns it? This is before the FirstNet stood up as an agency. The Department of Commerce was involved, FCC was involved, even the Department of Agriculture was involved. And we found some very creative government agency within the Department of Agriculture, Chris Smith, the CIO, who was willing to, hey, let's build a pilot. Ag was not going to own this network. They weren't going to operate this network. They were never going to acquire this network, but they had a need as a user. They had land, they had towers, they had lots of things to help enable this demonstration. We invested our time and money with them, and we built what was really the first FirstNet demonstration in Hilo, Hawaii, back in 2012. And we demonstrated it, invited the White House, invited the state of Hawaii, the DOD, DHS, and said, this is what it might look like. High definition cameras in police cars, radios on cell phones on fire trucks. Look where we are now. They're still doing the allocation, doing the build out. You got a carrier involved, which is a good thing. Lots of equipment vendors involved, but it's 2017 and we still don't have it yet. So, our advocacy is, let me show you what it might look like. If there's lots of us that can help, to write policy and build prototypes and everything else. But if I focus on just the timeline, the whole need for FirstNet came out of 9/11, and the need for all of our first responders to communicate, that was getting on 16 years ago. I'd be too frustrated. I wouldn't come to work anymore if I was so focused on the.
So what types of challenges do you see, I guess, in the move towards IoT and 5G? What will those have on spectrum allocation needs?
Yeah, when you look at Internet of Things, when you look at 5G, there is both point towards a complete integration of both licensed and unlicensed spectrum. And the unlicensed spectrum, which was originally viewed as, very localized, you can use it for your wireless phone in your house, and hobbyers can use it for wireless communications, and there's a little bit that can be used for short range communications, has really become absolutely critical. The availability of unlicensed spectrum in Wi-Fi bands to allow for Wi-Fi, high broadband, localized traffic is absolutely critical to make all of this work together. We recently joined the Fog Computing Consortium, which is led, I believe, by Microsoft and Intel. And we're one of the technology leaders in that space that are helping to advocate for certain frameworks, certain collaboration, sharing amongst the community, because as we get into the use of these ancillary networks, these more localized, less managed networks, they are going to be the feeders to the overall network infrastructure, in the same way that our highway system works, in the same way that our water supply and water distribution and power distribution system works, focusing on reliable, secure, broadband backbone technology that is augmented by all of the capillaries that feed into the system, and the unlicensed is really where the market is heading and where investments are being made. And that's certainly where we're spending our time more lately, less so on the big carrier frequencies and more so in the unlicensed domain.
Well, thanks again, Kevin. We definitely appreciate the insight today, and hopefully we can touch base again soon on the topic. Thanks so much for the time. Thanks soon.
Yeah, my pleasure, Dan. Anytime.
Well, thanks for watching this week's show, and make sure to check out our next carrier app when we're scheduled to speak with iConnective to discuss its work with helping the mobile industry combat fraud and other security issues. Thanks for watching.